Good day, my dear brothers and sisters. Peace be with you all. You are welcome to another edition of the weekly catechesis with Father January. Do you remember last week's edition? What we learned? Yes, we learned about the division of the catechism. Do you remember that we have 4 parts of the catechism of the Catholic Church? Do you remember all of them? The first part, the profession of faith. The second part, celebration of the Christian mystery. The third part, life in Christ. And the fourth part, Christian prayers. These are the 4 parts of the catechism of the Catholic Church as we learned in the last edition. My dear brothers and sisters, if you saw the catechism too big for you, don't worry. The church, in her own wisdom, has come out with what we call the compendium, and we have many of this compendium you can find in bookshops and where we sell Catholic articles for yourself, which is a summary of the catechism of the Catholic Church. We have here the compendium of the Catholic Church. We have this edition. We have so many of them. Compendium of the catechism of the Catholic Church. Then we also have, I believe, a little Catholic catechism. It is also a compendium, also made by the church to make it easier for us to read. We also have the Eucharist. The Eucharist, which came out in the year 2011, just simply known as the Youth Catechism, meant for the consumption of our youth, so that to make it easier to understand our faith. My dear friends, today we are going to look at the part 1 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. We will not look at all. We look at part 1, section 1, what we call man's capacity for God. Man's capacity for God. What does the church say about man's capacity for God? We shall look under this 4 things. The desire for God. Number 2, ways of coming to know God. Number 3, the knowledge of God according to the church. Then the last part, how can we speak about God? What does the catechism of the Catholic Church tell us? The desire for God. According to the catechism of the Catholic Church, number 27, it says, the desire for God is written in the human heart because man is created by God and for God, and God never ceases to draw man to himself. Only in God will he find the truth and happiness he never stops searching for. My dear friends, we are all created in the image and likeness of God. Like St. Augustine said, God has created us, and our soul will be restless until it finds rest in God. God has created us in Him, we live in Him, and we are to go back to God. And that is the desire of every man. He has created us for 3 purposes. 1, to know Him. 2, to love Him. And 3, to serve Him. This is the purpose for which God has created us into this world. And so we cannot do away with God. We cannot relegate God to the background, because we are His image and His likeness, and He is in us. God is in us. That is why at every point in time we always have that desire to go back to Him. And that is where religion comes from the word religio, to lean back on God, that source of power and that source of our strength and the source of our nourishment. The desire for man can never be taken away. According to the catechism, God is a vital principle that every human being gets to know. Now, how do we know God? Number 2, ways of coming to know God. According to the catechism of the Catholic Church, God is a spirit. God is supernatural. And so to begin to know God, we start from the physical things that he has created. Creation. Through creation, we get to know God. Through the things that he has created in the world. So the world starting from movement, becoming, contingency, and the world's order and beauty, one can come to the knowledge of God as the origin and the end of the universe. The only way to know God is through the things that he has created. Looking at the beauty of the world, looking at the vastness of the world, looking at how wonderful creation is, how wonderful the sky is, we come to know the awesomeness of this God. We get to know how supreme this God is than any other God from the things that he has created. Number 2, according to the catechism of the Catholic Church, we can also know God through human reasoning. It says our openness to truth and our openness to beauty, his sense of moral goodness, man's sense of freedom, and the voice of his conscience, with his longing for the infinite and for happiness, man questions himself about God's existence. In all this, he discerns signs of the spiritual soul. The soul, the seed of eternity we bear in ourselves, irreducible to the merely material. And because we have our origin in God, because we are created in God, through reasoning, we are able to know God. Then the third question, the knowledge of God according to the church. The question is are we capable of knowing God only through reason? According to the church, yes. Through reason and reason alone, we can come to know God. Said without this capacity, man will not be able to welcome God's revelation. Man has the capacity because he is created in the image of God. Our Holy Mother, the Church, holds and teaches that God, the first principle and last end of all things, can be known with certainty from the created world by the natural light of human reason. Number 36. And this is what the church teaches us. By the use of reasoning, we can come to know God, who is the first and the last principle of the world. Then we answer the last question. How can we speak about God? To speak about God, we still do not forget about the fact that God is spiritual and God is not human. But the only way we can talk about God is through our language and through our humanness, and this limits us. Our language is limited and our wisdom is limited. And so in number 40, the catechism says, since our knowledge of God is limited, our language about him is equally so. We can name God only by taking creatures as our starting point and in accordance with our limited human ways of knowing and thinking. Yes, we can talk about God, but only in our human language. That is why we can never fully describe God, because we are limited as human beings and our language to describe God is limited. And so what we say of God is not the totality of God, but what human reason will allow us. Our knowledge of God is also limited as compared to this infinite God. Beloved, this is what the first part of the catechism has for us. In summary, we are told that man by nature and vocation is a religious being. Why? Because we are coming from God and we are moving towards God, and we must end in God and we must rely on God. And so by nature, according to our catechism, we are religious beings. We are made to live in communion with God. And when we listen to God, he reveals himself to us. And since we have to speak about God, we can only do that by the knowledge we have of him and by our language, which are limited of him. This is what our catechism teaches us. My dear friends, we shall end here for our weekly catechesis. If you are listening to me, you can like our video and share with others. Tell others about this weekly catechesis, and let us all subscribe and learn more about our church. If you have any comment or any question, you can go and comment, and we shall have further interaction. May the Lord bless you. Peace and joy.